The manhwa begins with a stormy sky and a colossal piece of lightning. It's revealed to be a man's attack, causing the ground to split. The storm sounds fade, and we learn about the first king. This title is given to the man who subjugated the Jiangyu with his bare fist alone. He's called by this title more than his actual name, Danwuong. He stares down at a man, his eyes seeming annoyed. Then, he feels a sharp pain in his abdomen and reaches down to feel a wound. He says he was attacked by a mysterious group. He's dealt with all of them except for the final two, who are looking down at him from a cliff. He comments on how skilled they both look, wondering where they come from. Ready to end this, he punts one of the dudes toward the two of them. As he's flying towards them, he asks the sword demon to help him, but the demon took back shots a little too literally. As he cuts him in half with his two chunks falling to the floor, Wong says that he did that with zero hesitation, so he must be used to fighting dirty. He spots a tag that has the word blood written on it. Wong recognizes it, saying that paired with how cruel he is, he knows who the two of them are now, and that they are from the demonic faction. The sword demon jumps down, saying that he's impressed as he held up for so long and he deserves his title. Wong tells him to shut up as he'll kill him in just 10 attacks. He begins to widen his stance. The sword demon draws his blade, calling him arrogant. As he swings toward him, sending out purple strikes, he says they'll see how long his arrogance lasts. The first attack explodes, but Wong ducks underneath it, charging his hand for an attack, closing the gap. In an instant, he hits the sword demon straight in the chest, surprising him. He drops his sword and begins to spit up blood. Wong says that's one, and he starts to immediately come in with the second attack, going into a barrage up to 6. He says that this is strange as his attacks are missing all of his vital points. Now up to 9, Wong says it feels like someone is restraining him as a faint purple line appears around his arm. The other person is the one doing it, but Wong doesn't know when it happened. With his momentary distraction, the sword demon grabs his blade, piercing Wong through the chest. He begins coughing up blood and grabs onto his blade. The sword demon declares that the Fist King's reign ends here, but instead, his eyes look surprised as the purple aura thread snaps with brute force. Wang grits his teeth, rears his fist back, and strikes straight towards the sword demon. A massive explosion follows it. As it begins to settle, the sword demon is left with nothing but a graze on his cheek. Then, he begins to laugh out of relief, saying Wong is one hell of a fighter as he only missed his attack due to blood loss. However, we see it would have deleted this guy. The marionette says that could have been dangerous. The sword demon then starts poking Wong's head, saying if he's going to die, he should do it elsewhere. Only to get hit with a surprise upper. Wong thought he was dead, and Wong says that was still only 10 attacks. The marionette starts to laugh as the sword demon is embarrassed. Wong says his strength is all leaving, so this is the end for him. But he is a bit regretful he didn't hit him one last time, and he wishes he did. He has now died at the hands of the demon faction, only for us to see a giant blue lightning strike in a courtyard. We are brought to the Jua Mountain safe house. With a woman standing over a bed, she says that was scary. As Wong slowly opens his eyes, he's confused as she is asking if he is all right. He wonders where he is, saying it's a surprise he was treated. He sits up in the bed, noticing he has no injuries. She asks if he wants some water. Wong says sure, but is curious as to why she is calling him first young master. As he sips his water, he takes a glance in a nearby mirror, only to not recognize his face at all. He spits out his drink like a water fountain and starts trying to remove his face, mistaking it for a mask. However, a closer look reveals no line on his neck, so it's not a mask. As he continues to attempt to remove it, the girl notices him fiddling with it and says she'll return with the physician. He even slaps himself and tries again. As she exits the room, she comments on his strange behavior. Back in the room, Wong suggests it couldn't have been from the demon faction, as they typically seize control of Young Hu. However, he wonders whose face he is wearing and needs to get up and find out. He slowly rises, struggling to walk even 2 steps. He expresses his discomfort, stating that his body feels awful. This is your point of view. After a grueling leg day, he manages to reach a chair and reads Yunha Merchant Group on the book. He recognizes it as a large group near Jewel Mountain, despite having no prior knowledge of merchant groups. The recipient of the letters is his body's owner, the eldest son, Jean. All the letters are addressed to him, some requesting money and others inviting him to gamble. Wuong expresses his frustration, calling himself a loser. He realizes that it's not sorcery nor a mask, and he doesn't feel any strange sensations, leading him to believe that he has somehow reincarnated into this body. He sighs, acknowledging that he's lost his mind. Suddenly, a man yells, and Wuong quickly runs into the room, performing a bizarre pose routine. It's Gong Shan, his physician. Wuong begins to cringe, wondering who he is. Gong explains that he was informed about Wuong's unusual behavior and expresses his concern. He starts checking Wuong's pulse. Wuong pulls away, stating that he doesn't need to worry. Gong expresses his relief and prepares his usual meal, bringing in chicken soup. However, Wuong criticizes the soup, calling it rotten and poisonous for someone so sick and weak. He suggests that Gong might have checked his pulse, worried about his good health. Wuong's suspicions grow, and he realizes that Gong is nothing but a snake. Gong reveals that if he eats well, he can attend the Dragon Phoenix Martial Competitio. Wuong then asks how many years the competition has been going on. Gong says around 200. Wuong tells him all right and to leave the soup, but he has no appetite. Then shoos Gong out, telling him he's sleepy. As he closes the door, he sighs, saying that this means it hasn't been long since he died, which is good as the demonic faction should be alive, too. Them plus this snake-like physician. There are many people who need a beating, but they will definitely get their fill as this time he won't give them the luxury of more than a single hit. It jumps to later as some of the maids are surprised as he used to only eat porridge. Now he has a crazy appetite and is exercising regularly. He shoves the door open and we see he is no longer the frail man from before. Going to call him Jean since he is in his body now. He asks if they've prepared his breakfast. He approaches it while getting dressed, saying to keep it like this. As they start leaving, they say he looks much healthier. His physician then knocks at the door. As Jean goes to eat, the maids look over seeing him not happy, wondering if they should let him in or not. Jean tells him to enter as he brushes into one of the housemaids. Jean says that he sure is rude as the snake starts to pretend to be happy. It just pisses him off as he doesn't understand why he is kissing him. He smiles, saying he wants to catch this rat. Jean asks him what he needs, which panics him. He says it's because he didn't hear from him at all, so he came out of loneliness. He then comments on how healthy he looks, saying his effort feels meaningless. Jean asks what he means, asking if he means when he was killing him with that chicken soup. Gong is surprised, saying there is a misunderstanding as it is a nourishing tonic. Jean says he could have fooled him. Gong reminds him he is a physician, saying if he isn't welcome, he'll take his leave. Jean calls to him as he is leaving, saying he came without being called for. Now he's trying to leave without being told to, wondering if he is the master here or him. Jean laughs, telling him he is joking. Gong nervously laughs too. Jean tells him he needs to write a letter, so go get him writing tools. As he does so, Jean says he'll dictate while he writes for him. He says due to his severe illness, he will be staying in the villa for some time. Since his life is so stubbornly long, he wants to be advised on what to do next. Gong freezes up as Jean asks why he isn't writing. Gong laughs, asking what he's doing, only for the chopsticks to fly right by his neck, piercing into the wall. He feels his neck bleeding as Jean says that he isn't the man he remembers. Gong, panicked, asked what he means. Jean says first of all the soup to normal people it's a healthy tonic, but to him it is most certainly a poison, which he definitely knows, asking if he wouldn't notice him checking his pulse, most importantly when he told them to just leave the food as he had no appetite. Gong couldn't hide his killing intent and anger. He clearly isn't acting alone, so he wants the name of those giving him orders. Gong asks why he's doing this and why he would suspect such a kind man alongside, but Jean stares at Gong. Instantly stops pretending. He was just trying to let him pass with dignity, calling him a fool. Gong takes a look at the maids, saying he needs to kill them, too. As he brandishes a hidden needle, Jean swings down towards his head, palming the top of his skull. He starts to spit up blood while Jean tells him to stop getting funny ideas as he just needs to listen when being spoken to. Jean says his hand hurts and his body sure is pitiful. He needs to recover his strength quickly. Once he does, it won't matter even if the mastermind is the entirety of the Union Merchant Group. When he returns, he will investigate Gong thoroughly. He starts to feel a sharp pain, wondering where his headache came from. He hears someone call out to him. He starts getting flashbacks. Recognizing that these memories flooding in are from the original body's owner, all pouring into his head. Tears begin rolling down his face. He says he understands now. As the first son of the merchant group, he isn't as smart as his second brother, not as strong as his third, he was a lacking elder brother. He tried to compensate for his shortcomings with money, but ended up coping with simple pleasure. By the time he realized his mistakes and looked back, it was far too late. He was then sent to this villa. If his memories are correct, his main clan wouldn't care about this place. The problem he had originally was being reincarnated without the body's memories, but now he can focus fully on martial arts. He can't believe such an insanely good body was wasted. With his knowledge, he'll reach a high level in no time. He then realizes something else as he looks at all of his money. He says that he hears nothing he can't afford in terms of health items. He looks at Gong's corpse, saying he needs to bury him. As the seasons begin changing throughout the estate, we get a 1-year time skip. A man enters the gate saying he has a letter for the young master. This is one of the Union Merchant Group's guard squad members named Mok In-seop. The maid tells him he's training. In-seop glances over at him meditating, saying there is no way that is the young master he remembers. During this time his energy core manifested. He engraved all the martial arts requires for survival onto this body. It is the enlightened mobility art, enlightened body art, the rapid stride. Also an art that allows him to control lightning. The white lightning 10-phase art. He is currently in the 4th phase. Everything has gone smoothly so far. He jumps off the ground. Using his hand to prop himself up, he kicks a falling leaf which breaks into 4 pieces, but he isn't satisfied, saying it isn't enough. In-seop calls out to him, introducing himself, saying he is here to bring a letter from the main clan. Jean tells him to hand it over. In-seop, still just in disbelief as he remembers him as a Make-A-Wish kid. Jean tells him to stop making him wait. As he begins to read the letter, we learn his father has collapsed and is bedridden, but it doesn't explain why he fell ill. In-seop says he thinks he knows why. It's because of the Yang clan, asking if he knows how they have been paying tributes to them under the pretext of protection. The payments have snowballed, becoming unbearable. Jean asks if they've done anything to merit increased fees. He says, hell no. They are just dogs. Even when the little deity sect tried to impose crazy trade taxes, the Yang clan said they only meet with the main clan of Yunhai if there's a serious issue, but they ended up doing nothing. Their guard captain couldn't even protest because it was Yang, who Jean says he recognizes the name. He is a well-known man in the Jianghu. He's strong enough for someone like him to know of. So, he must think the merchants are under him. So, if he deals with them, it'll be resolved. In-seop wonders what he means by deal with them, but also says there's another reason for his father's collapse. There was a sword fight between his 2 brothers. After he watched them fighting, he collapsed. Jean wonders if he collapsed out of anger, then he says yes. Jean can't believe they fought in front of their father with swords, no less. In-seop tries to tell him not to worry, but Jean says nah, telling him to keep the letter. He stands up before him, looking down at In-seop, informing him he will go himself. It then jumps to In-seop telling the other guards that he's changed. He has become an actual martial artist and has a great body. The others start looking at each other before bursting out into laughter, asking if he is taking something. They joke that he is always with women, so he's become a bed warrior. And one of the dudes say that he'd be a legendary warrior of the sheets. Telling In-seop that if he's trying to joke, to put effort into it, at least saying that the vice captain has a lover would be more believable, who appears right behind him asking if the young master had regained his health. We are introduced to Han Yeep, the vice captain. Han Yeep says that he always had a fine physique, asking In-seop if he knows when Jean is returning. He says that he has no idea, but then someone shouts saying that he's here right now. Inseop says there he goes. The guards say it's time to greet him, but one of them says he doesn't want to get up for a good for nothing. Han Yip reminds him who pays them. As Jin approaches the main building, he looks around saying it's nuts. The Union Merchant Group sure does have a lot of funds to afford something of such a scale. He wasn't just moderately well off. He was born with a silver spoon. He tells two of his maids that he'll go see his father and they can rest up. As he heads off, he is confused, wondering why not a single person is welcoming him. He then hears tons of footsteps. As he turns, seeing the guards all welcoming him for returning safely. Han Yip greets him with a bow. He says that he is almost unrecognizable, but he is relieved to see him healthy. The other man wonders if Han Yip has no pride. As Jin was a violent man, looking down on others and that he's just going to be mocked once more, Jin puts his hands together, saying it's a pretty good welcome even though he's just a troublemaker. Thanking them all. The guards are surprised that he actually greeted them all for the first time ever. Inseop says he told them that he had changed. They say he's right. Han Yip stares at him, then lets out a warm smile as they all agree he seems like an ally now rather than an enemy. Inside of the building, Han Yip says he informed his father of his visit as he goes to enter. Someone else does too. Saying he can't believe what he is seeing, he puts his hand on Jin's shoulder. This is his youngest brother, Jaein. Jin doesn't say anything, but Jaein says his expression makes him seem like a different person as he can even glare now. He begins to squeeze his shoulder. Han Yip says that it looks like he came back to just be smacked like he used to. To try and prevent anything, he speaks up, saying that they've reunited after a good bit, so they must be happy to see one another. Jaein slaps him, asking who he thinks he is touching. Jin watches Jaein continues saying that he's already pissed having to deal with the good for nothing. Now he's making it worse, and he's going to teach him a lesson so he won't look him in the eyes ever again. Jin brushes his cheek, calling out to his brother before slapping the piss out of him. As he begins to spit up blood and look confused while falling backwards. Han Yip is speechless. Jaein asks what the hell he thinks he's doing. Jin says he was excited on his way here as he squeezes his shoulder like he did earlier. Jaein begins to scream loudly, calling him an insane bastard. Jin says that he should stop calling him names and refer to him as Big Brother. Later, elsewhere in the manor, someone is walking through it, spotting the guards yapping. This is the second son who's an overseer for the group. Hua, he asks what's going on. Han Yip tells him about how his brothers were arguing. Huan thinks that Jaein must be harassing the eldest again. Asking why they didn't stop him as his older brother is weak. He quickly runs into the sounds of screaming as Jin is telling his brother to be quiet in front of father's room. He spots Hua who is just confused. They head to another room as Weian starts to sit tea. Jaein continues to be scolded. He says he heard he returned so he came to check on him but he seems to be in good health. Jin says he is fine now looking at his injured hand asking if John did that. He tells him yes but it isn't that serious. Jin raises his hand, slapping him once more, making blood pour out of his nose, telling him he shouldn't wield a sword against his brothers unless he wants a beating. Bro is domesticating him. He looks so defeated. Jaein can't believe that he got beaten up as he used to be so weak in the past. Huan is just glad his brother got humbled, but he wonders if something happened at the safe house as he seems like a different person. Jin nods, saying his eyes are good. Then spots something on the table, asking what it's for. Huan says it's a list of employees, so he needs to take it to the conference room. As he begins to look through the list, he says he wants to see who recommended Gong's son, but that isn't needed. The person who did all of it is none other than Yang Hu. He sets the scroll down, calling out to his brothers, saying he needs to know now if either of them are working with the Yang clan, which catches them off guard. Huayan panics, asking him if he thinks that's a possibility. Even John says it's ridiculous. Jaein says he'd rather die than let some random group take over their clan. Their father worked too hard to grow it himself. Jin is glad to hear that, saying he won't need to kill them. He then asks if all of the higher-ups will be attending the conference tomorrow. They say yes. He tells them if that's the case, he'll be there. As he leaves, they ask where he's going. He says to see father. Once he leaves, they just wonder what the hell happened at the safe house. Jaeon screams, saying he should have gone instead. At his father's room, they inform him the eldest is here. He says to enter. As Jin does, his father looks over at him. We learn his name is Yongmin, who asks what all of the commotion outside was about. Jin says nothing, but sits down saying he heard he was stressed. Min says yes, he's always been under stress, but now he's old and can't bear it. He raises his hand touching his cheek, saying he's changed a lot for the better, but his face looks different, asking if he's really Jin, but laughs saying he's glad to see him doing well. Jin says yes, but finds it strange. He grew up without parents, so he doesn't know what having a father is like. But in Jin's memories, his father was a really big, great person and loved his son and clearly still does. Even through his rough patch, but he wonders when he got so small. He tells his father not to worry. They just need to eliminate the cause of his stress. He will handle it so he can rest well. His father asks what he means by eliminate. With an evil smile, Jin tells him not to worry. His father says that smile is giving weird vibes. The next day at the conference, everyone is now present. Yang, who makes an appearance. He is also the Yang clan's martial master. His men start whispering after spotting Jin. As they all wonder what the eldest son is doing here, they look over who begins to laugh saying he must be worried about his position in the group. A bit later into the meeting, Hwan says that if nobody has anything to say, he'll move on. Hu raises his hand saying he does. He heard that the first young master doesn't have a guard despite coming back. So he wants to recommend one. Some people ask if Hu really doesn't know when to stop as he has too many Yang members in the Yunha group already. A toothpick flies in breaking his cup and Hu says his hand happened to slip apologizing to the man. The guards want to speak up but can Hu then says if nobody has anything to say but Jin speaks up saying he has complaints. He walks forward toward Hu saying he wants to make a suggestion too. A suggestion to fire the guard squad leader who everyone is surprised whose men begin to laugh saying that's a horrible joke who also starts laughing asking if he really wants to fire him saying he must have been bedridden for so long reminding him he has no say over that. Jin chuckles asking if that's really so. As he rears back his fist glaring at Hu. We see a giant explosion follow his punch, sending debris everywhere. After it begins to settle, Hu looks dumbfounded. Jin says that he must have forgotten since he gained some influence. But the Union Merchant Group belongs to him. Little flashback to before the meeting. Hwan asks if he's really planning to fire Hu, warning him they are just a merchant group, so he's out of their league. Jin stops walking, asking if he knows what happens when a martial artist of the Jianyu is underestimated. The one who makes such an assumption is devoured. Telling him to look at the state of their group, saying it's being devoured as they speak. Hua says he is right, wondering when the Yang clan got so many members. Jin tells him not to worry as his older brother he will handle this. Back to the present, Huan is nervous as hell, asking if this is how he's going to go about it. Hu's men brandish their swords yelling at him, who wonders what he is planning and if he's gone mad. He gets up and asks if they have a death wish for drawing their blades against the first young master. As the boys pull up for some murim blood versus Crips. Jin says he's right and that was truly insolent. He looks pissed asking if they are drawing their sword against their employer. He mumbles saying they really have a death wish. But since he feels a bit bad towards Hu he will count this as compensation, who asks what he means by feel bad. Jin says that he ruined his retirement plans. He had Gong's son try to assassinate him, he caused his brothers to fight, ultimately leading to his father's collapse. Had he just swayed one of the sons, he could have taken over the entire group without lifting a finger. Hu laughs saying that is a pure delusion. Jin walks forward saying that it went wrong when the Gong son who was meant to kill him died by his hands. That is when fate decided Hu had enough who asks if he seriously killed Gong. Jin tells him not to worry as he sent him off in a single strike. He tells him if he wanted to devour a merchant group he should have worked harder. He will file claims for the damages you caused. Hu begins to prepare a palm attack. Jin says this is what he wanted as Hu leaps at him saying he has a death wish. Jin clenches his fist and meets his palm, generating a shock wave throughout the room whose men have to brace themselves not to fall. Who was just surprised by the lightning energy and if he learned martial arts. Who distances himself. His men are also surprised that he knows martial arts. Jin asks if it's fine for him to strike him who just finished recuperating, but says it's fine if this will be an official duel. Who gets pissed, says he's cocky for a chick who just learned to fly, but yells saying the young clan and with Jin's consent, they shall proceed with a duel. Who smiles, asking if that is good enough. Jin puts his hands up saying no, it needs to be a life or death duel. Who says he must have studied under an impressive sect. In a short time, his skills have become quite decent. However, he falls short in terms of experience and he will know the difference now. Jin dodges underneath the attack, leaving Who confused as he looks down. Jin begins to charge his fist, saying he doesn't need someone to tell him about experience. He hits straight in the gut, sending him flying high into the air. He spits up blood, wondering what's the deal with his strength. Jin says he will show him what a difference in experience looks like. Still mid-fly back, he closes the gap using his enlightened mobility art. He swings, which Who blocks. He manages to regain his footing. As they start trading blow for blow, moving around the room, but Who is permanently stuck on the defensive, struggling with each strike. He says something isn't right. This isn't someone who just learned martial arts. It feels like he is fighting a seasoned martial master. He tightens the grip on his blade, releasing a purple aura, saying no way. His men get excited, saying he's going to finish it. Who says he refuses to lose. His martial art is the three-form sword art. Who says he is just a brat. Jin uses rapid stride, closing the distance once more instantly. Who wonders when he got there, but Jin is rearing back his fist, telling him farewell, hitting him straight in the chin with one hell of an upper. The boys in Hajime no would be proud as he flies out of the roof itself. Everyone looks up at the hole in the ceiling completely and utterly speechless at the sight of a martial master being sent flying from the first young master. Even the father is looking at it. His physician asks what's going on. The leader puts his hands together saying his son seems to have learned martial arts. Back to the fight. Who lands back on the ground before Jin, who glares down at him as Who is no longer moving. Blood pours out of his mouth. His men run over, calling out to their leader. They look up at Jin and he asks if they want to die, too. Who is dead as hell. One of the men step up, saying that they'll admit there wasn't anything unfair in the duel, but that if the group continues to demand duels out of revenge, they cannot turn it down or avoid them. Jin says he never expected to be free of grudges anyways. If there is kind of shown, he'll repay it. If there's a grudge, he'll pay it back. If anyone takes issues with that, then the responsibility will be his alone, not the union merchant groups. One says that's too dangerous. Jin says he said it before. The merchant group is his, but it is also his father's as well as the guard squads and the maids who work hard to feed him daily. So, he refuses to let people toy with his merchant group. If they understand to get lost as they are all fired. Inseop looks like he's about to cry. Whose men are pissed and walk away saying they'll wish him luck. After they've left, they all turn towards Jin. Inseop begins to shake and screams while crying, but one of the men covers his mouth saying they should feel ashamed for just standing by as his guards. Jin calls out to Hwan, saying he wants elixirs. He said he'd take responsibility, so he should be okay taking this much. Hwan says he'll prepare the best quality tonic they can as he'll be busy with the elixirs and buying new guards. Jin says that if that's the case, he has some people in mind already. As we see a man asking if they are certain it was Jin. Back to the Yunha group, we get a flashback to a few days ago. When Jin first arrived, he notices something asking Haney up if he's eaten. He says no as he has been working since dawn. Jin says he thought so but now he understands how it is. He looks down spotting Who's men saying that some people haven't had time to eat because others are slacking off during working hours. They must think they can live off others' money so he should root them all out. But there's a bigger problem. He needs someone to fill their place. He thinks about it saying there they are inside. As it is a casino or a gambling den might be more appropriate. Some people spot him saying it's the pushover. As Jin enters it, he looks around. Some people say they thought he died as they didn't see him for a while, but they are sure he's going to waste a lot of money again. He heads towards a private room. The guard notices him saying it's been a while, asking if he's back to be a sucker, but corrects himself, asking if it's for a generous donation. Jean says he doesn't want Porkchop to touch him and to open the door. Piggy starts to get offended. Jean enters the room as we see a man across a table. He says he's finally here and that he looks better, so maybe the recuperation time worked for him. This is the poisonous fox, Cholong Ho. He has two bald twin guards named Yak Jimbo and Mongbo. Manhwa says it's been a while, so the bald twins should greet him properly. They apologize. Manhwa says that he's his friend, so they should be considerate. Jean sits down saying that they have been friends since childhood, but it also included a ton of very one-sided violence and financial exploitation. He says the word friend is different for young people. Manhwa says since he's back after a long time, he should have some fun. He must be itching to gamble. It's actually Manhwa itching to suck money from him. He says he'll treat him to something big, but he notices Jean being quiet, saying it's pissing him off. Jean says he's busy thinking. Manhwa asks about what, but it's about whether he kills him or not. He doesn't need my Manhwa, he needs the twins. They probably live as thugs under him and are too valuable to rot under him. Jean says he's decided. Manhwa asks if he's ignoring him. Jean says first to hand over the vault key. Manhwa stares at him for a second, then asks if he's just wanting money. Jean says, yes, he'll take all the cash for now. He starts talking about the money he was extorted for and what he is owed. He says it should be 100,000 nyongs to be fair. Manhwa stares at him, then begins to chuckle, going into a full-blown laughter. He says that he turned into a comedian, asking the twins if they heard it, too. He stands up laughing, saying the vault also has tons of jewelry, but that's all for him. Inside, there's not a single thing for Jean Ian. If he needs money, he can lend it. Wondering why he asked for the vault key so suddenly. Jean sits there for a second and Manhwa asks why the hell he has been ignoring him this entire time as it's making him pissed. He acts all fragile because he was sick, but now he's glaring at him demanding money, telling him to get a grip, reminding him who he is. Still being ignored, he lets out a sigh, asking him what is wrong with him as he starts snapping in front of his face. He tells the bold twins to rock his brains. As they walk over, grabbing onto him. Jean raises up, surprising one of them, saying he went through the trouble of showing kindness. He grabs one by the arm and begins squeezing it, then throws him across the room. So far, he breaks the door. The other one comes in with an overhand right, which Jean ducks underneath. Putting his hands on the floor, he kicks towards Baldy's legs, shattering his leg. Thought he was going to use them, but he crippled the guy. As he grits his teeth from the pain, he falls to the floor. He glances over, saying, "This is quite surprising." As the other brother is back, they both start to make their way back to him. He says that's quite a sight. They both have broken bones, but not the slightest hint of fear in their eyes. He smiles widely, saying they are the real deal. They scream, leaping at him. He dodges the attack, saying it's time to end it. As he vanishes from in front of them, both of them are confused, wondering where he went. As he appears right behind them, palming their bald heads, he says they are too valuable to just let them rot away. He smashes their heads together, telling them to stay put because he won't warn them twice, as all that is left now is Manhwa, who sweats nervously, saying he's in deep. Jean smiles, saying it's just his dear friend. Now that our chat is done with the baldies, he now shifts to the turd. As Nyungo is nervous, Jean says it just only him that is left. The turd tells Jean that he should have informed him that he learned martial arts instead of arithmetics during his recuperation. Jean tells him that usually he is quick on the uptake, but not this time. Instead, this turd hides a knife, telling Jean not to come any closer. Telling him to talk this out, in his mind he says that there is no need to be afraid. As he rushes towards him, saying himself that our Chad is just a pushover. But as he closes the distance, Jean kicks him in the gut and then proceeds to punch him. But instead stop at the last moment, grabbing his head, saying that the counter-striker wins and releases a thunderstrike. From the outside, the guards outside think that today's gonna be the day someone dies at this rate. As he lets him go, he falls to the ground. As he quivers on the ground, our Chad tells him to snap out of it. He laughs, saying what it is that he wants, wondering to himself what our Chad was during his recuperation. He wonders if he went to secret training instead of actual recuperation. He wonders if he is doing this to get revenge on him, but he was not that rude to him. In his false delusion, he thinks it was all to get revenge on him. So he gets up, telling him if there is something he wants other than the key. All he needs is to just say the word. He tells him that although he bullied him a bit, they have been friends since they were kids. Jin agrees, telling him he is right. Hearing this, Myungo says that he is right and this is what friendship is about. He hugs Jin, saying that from now onward he won't bully or hit him. Hearing this, Jin tells him to let go. He continues to glaze Jin, saying that they are brothers, then commands the twins greet Jin as their big brother. Oh, he should congratulate him on his transformation. As they congratulate our Chad, this turd thinks to himself that they are not on the same level. He is someone who grumbled, licked his boot and wagged his tail at his words. As Jin remains quiet, he says that once he gets out of this, he is grabbing the twins and running away from this place. If he has the two of them settling in a new place is no big deal. Jin calls the twins and says that if he calls someone his sworn brothers, it is for life, and confirming if they are okay with this. They are looking at Myungo as he says that they are sworn brothers now. As the twin greets our Chad as sworn brothers, as everything was going according to his plan, Jin turns sinister all of a sudden, telling him that they are brothers and they need to decide who the biggest brother will be. He tells the two of them to step outside and they will decide between themselves. Myungo, hearing all this, gets confused. As they leave, our Chad tell him to decide and he wonders if this is not for money. He tells this turd that he got his money's worth out of the twin and it should not be how people act. So from now onwards he will treat them right. Hearing this, he tells him to just take the money. He is frustrated because he beat him up and now he is even taking the twin brothers. He is just bluntly telling him to die, so he should just kill him. Jin says alright and they lands a super kick, making him spills blood, saying that he has worked hard, as he continues to punch him non-stop without leaving him a second. He thinks that he might have said something wrong, as he might really kill him. At the last moment he stops and the turd says he is going to give him the key, so he should just spare him. Jin tells him if this is the tone of someone who should be begging for his life. But this turd tells him that if he should speak respectfully since they are friends. So he throws him towards the door. As the twins check on him, Jin is pissed, telling him he has the guts to laugh at him. Myungo thinks to himself that Jin is not on his right mind. The twins asks him if he really lost. He tells the twins that he lost and from now onwards Jin will be their big brother. He thinks to himself that it is humiliating, but thinks it's still better for them to live in some place nice, like the Manhwa merchant group, instead of this gambling den. But they have been with him for so long, they have a bond. He thanks them for everything, and as he was leaving the den, he says that the old folks were right, to never take in creature with black hair. Everyone outside is talking about him as they wonder where the twins are who followed him. Since they are gone, they can beat him up. As people surround him, Myungo laughs, saying that now dogs are ganging up on him also. But he got guts, telling them to come after him if they have guts. The answer piss, saying that a dead man wailing still has a mouth. As they charge towards him, he says that he might actually die. So Jin should have taken it easy on him, but out of nowhere a fist intrudes, blowing all of the attackers. A voice tells him that they could not look him in the eyes, but since he weak now they are attacking him. It's Jin as he tells them that if they want to kill him they should come at him when he is half dead. As he keep correcting them, Myungo leaves, telling him that he is acting all cool and crap. As the twin continues to follow our Chad, they thank him for saving Myungo. As they move forward carrying their luggage, Jin says that anyone who has been to the gambling den wondered why they followed him. Some thought they were brought as slaves and the others said they were afraid of him. Even he though do, but they never followed him for that. As he sighs, he wonders that even in his second life understanding true intentions of people is very hard. From the shadows someone is looking at our Chad, unable to believe that it is really our Chad. This part starts with Jaeon telling himself that after Jin came back, there hasn't been a single peaceful day. He is frustrated because the other day, he brought back a ton of money out of nowhere, and along with two big guys. So he has come to the conclusion that he doesn't like him, that when he notices some movement, it's none other than Inseop charging into the residence with a huge cart. As for Hwayeon, he is managing the goods, telling the workers to carefully carry the goods as they are important goods inside. Jaehyun asks him what all this is about, as he gets super happy that they bought in super rare elixir that is not even on the market. That when a voice gains their attention, his father is the one that ordered them. Hwayeon tells old man to not stay out since she is not in the best shape. But he tells him to calm down since he is now in a much better shape. Jaehyun the third asks the old man what he is going to do with these elixirs. He is even for happy that Jin only wanted one, but his father brought too much, as he gets greedy that some of it might be for him as well. But his little dream starts crumbling down when old man tells him that all of it is for his brother. He asks him once again if all of these precious elixir is for his brother. He elaborates that just one elixir won't change their fate. Considering how much he spent on the trash guards, this much is nothing. He has also sent letters to the heads of their regional branches, old friends, and the great merchants respect, and told them that he would be buying high-quality elixirs to overcome the company's crisis. If their company fall, they will also suffer as well, so they took it seriously, but his biggest mistake was hiring a rat as captain of the escort group. So he will need to clean up at least this much. Han Yip tells the leader that it is a wise decision since the young leader would be a great warrior. As everyone continues to appreciate his brother, Hwayeon cannot believe just what is happening. Old man is very happy as he laughs, telling them that he finally has the opportunity to blow through the money he saved all his life. As for the turd with shattered dreams, he has no words. After some, he has gone crazy swinging his sword like a madman. What happened is that he asked his father where his elixir is. Hearing this, old man remains quiet and then with a dissatisfied look asks him if he is really in need of one. As he goes around swinging his swords, he cannot survive because wherever he goes, it's all about Jin, as this crybaby is whining about why he got an elixir and he didn't. And they are all clearly discriminating against him, as he sobs wondering what kind of miraculous encounter he had. That when he notices some movement and in an instant our hat is running at blazing speeds. He pushes his aside saying that he is out for a walk. Going past him, he has attached a huge boulder. The turd cannot imagine what normal person goes for a walk like this. Moreover, he even has weights attached to his legs. As he is out of breath but still continuing to walk, the turd realizes that our Chad is really putting in the work. As he falls to the ground, he holds his sword high and keeps staring at it. Even thought the sun is setting, he is still swinging his sword. He is trying to mimic someone as he throws some cringe dialogues. Although he tried his best compared to what Jin showcased, it compares to nothing. That when our Chad tells him what he is still doing here, and all he can answer is that his sudden appearance scared him. With fear clearly on his face, he asks Jin what he is doing here since he went for a walk. Our Chad responds that he is going to critique at least, so he should do it right. He tells Jaehyun to try replicating it with his sword since he managed to copy the turd's final move pretty well. Hearing this, he is embarrassed because he was watching it all this time. As he tries to replicate the sword move, he breaks the training staff. He is impressed by his move, but our Chad breaks his bubble, telling him that he has an extremely sloppy stab. Hearing this, he gets pissed, and as he turns around, Jin throws a punch towards him, which he surprisingly managed to block. Jin says that he let his guard down. Jin now lands a kick which makes him fall to the ground, telling him that just now he panicked and fell to the ground. Jaehyun thinks that this psycho is going to kill him, so he begs him if they can just talk it out. Since our Chad is not listening to him at all, he picks up his sword and charges towards him. But he looks up to see that our Chad has disappeared. In an instant he is behind him, as our Chad tells him that when people lose control they get backed into a corner. That is when someone pulls out their trump card, but all this turd did is shiver, so Jin had to stop at the last moment. After the battle, he falls to ground and thinks to himself that he could have died just now. Jin tells him that stabbing has a lower rate of hit than slashing. Moreover, the turd's move, whatever it is called, was a one-strike technique, so he had no choice but to be cautious with his thrust. So if he can move faster than a split second, the outcome will be decided. While giving his brother lecture, he realizes that in his previous life, he wouldn't even let a guy like the escort guard draw his sword. Because his current body doesn't have half the strength his old body had, so there is no way he can be satisfied with defeating someone like Gu Yanghu. Yet even as the Fist King, he failed to surpass some people. So this won't do. As he grips his sword tight, he tells himself that he has become stronger than ever before beyond comparison. That's when one of his guard tells him that there is someone waiting for him outside. Jin then proceeds to flicks the head of his brother. He starts complaining, but he just takes his leave, completely ignoring him. The visitors are consoling each other that there can't be no way Jin learned martial art, and the only thing he cared was about girl. So there is no way he is a fighter, but one of them called Guwong tells them that he saw it with his own eyes. The other day he was drunk and walking by the gambling den operated by Myango. He noticed our Chad and seeing him he gets surprised. One of the other minion asked what happened next and he says that afterwards he puked and when he looked again it was all gone. One of them is Ju Jar Yang and the other one is Samaguk and they both won't believe him telling him to cut it out. As they confidently enter Jin's room every single one of them is shocked since he is all jacked up now. Just looking at the scene they instantly close the door, and then proceeds to ask his maid if it really is Jin. Asking her if he is some dummy piece, as she confirms to them that he really is the young master. They asks each other if they drank too much the other day since he is way different from what he is used to. As they were continuing to think to themselves, Jin opens the door scaring all of them. First thing he tells it to his maid, as she should take the twins to the dining hall and feed them until they are full. As they leave he order the 2 chickens what they are waiting for, and with a deadly look tells them to get inside. Seeing this they pray to God to send someone to save them. These turds named themselves the self-proclaimed heavenly kings of wine and woman. The first one of them is from the Murim Alliance, the hopeful Simaguk, the second one if the irritable bowel syndrome and repeated exam taker Ju Jar Yang. The third one is the West Wind establishment, the youngest heir of the household Guwang and last but not least the infamous Riz Lord Urchad Jin. They had all gathered on the occasion that their pushover friend had returned. As they continue eating, Jin wonders if he again has to deal with these self-proclaimed friends again. From his memories he remembers that Jin hung out with them a lot, always talking about liquor and women. They called themselves something like the 4 unruly drunken idiots or the 4 total wrecks. Jar Yang asks Jin if he is doing alright as he was about to pick food. Looking at his arms he says that more than fine but too intense. Guwang holds his hand saying that it is hard to believe that the one he saw that day was really him, as he asks him if he trained non-stop in secret or something. Guk, who is amateur than the rest, thinks to himself that just training alone is not enough to reach this level. As he continues to observe him he realizes that Jin has learned martial arts. As he pours drinks he asks Jin that he heard the rumors that he beat the head guard. Jin says that he is lucky hearing this. Guk says that if it was one of those fateful encounters in the Jianghu that he can only hear about. Jar Young says that at first he couldn't recognize him at all, but our Chad becomes a buzzkill telling him that the guy they knew is dead, making them lose words from their mouth instantly. Yet Jar Young asks him what he plans to do now. Hearing this, Jin was about to speak of the demonic sect, then twists his words saying that he has debts that are tied to a certain sect. While preparing for it he will help the merchant group, saying all this while saying that he is not interested in anything but getting stronger. Hearing all this they remain quiet and Guwang asks Jar Young what is wrong with Jin, and if they entered the wrong house or something. The smartest among them, Guk, remain quiet. In a flashback we see him and Jin in a certain place. As Jin shares him that he is almost exiled, wondering if that his father might be disappointed. He tells him that it is a great idea, so in this time he can use this time to recover and study and change. Hearing this Jin laughs saying that it would have been great. Moving to the present as he pours Jin another drinks he congrats, saying him that he has really changed. Seeing this Jin is surprised and as for the other they also thinks it is something worth celebrating. As one of them says that before he got sent away they should have kidnapped him anyways. As they continue having these stupid filler talks, our Chad sighs saying that it turns out even he had real friends. Since that is the case he puts out the liquor bottle, saying them that he is changed now. What about them? Hearing this they remain quiet for some time and then proceeds to laugh at him saying that if they were the type to change easily, they wouldn't be they. As such they stop the conversation and enjoy drinks. Jar Young enjoying his drinks while staring at his drinks state that they are all frogs in a well, and memories of the time they enjoyed together for years flooded his thoughts. Among all of this one of them managed to climb out and saw the world. As they are done with the party the minions say that they had a lot of fun, and Jar Young cheers him up saying that he has to train hard so he don't get beat up somewhere. As our Chad bids them farewell they walk further and Guuna says that among all of them the most screwed up has grown back up. Quite tell them to stop saying that he is feeling lonely, so Jar Young asks if they should visit the brothel then. Hearing this he gets pissed telling him to go back and study, degrading him by saying that he is an academy dropout. Hearing this he says that he is good at studying but terrible at exams. Then one of them suggests they drop by Sweet Scent House for one more drink, going to the Sen house, someone is extremely pissed as he bangs the table spilling the drink. All this because Ouyang Yu died, and this person is the sect leader Yeo, Jisung, but we will call him Ginger. He asks the minion that if Jin is really that strong, and without exaggeration he says that they couldn't exchange 30 exchanges before the captain died. When he went to carry the corpse of his leader, this turd wanted to bark, but seeing our Chad in person he couldn't do anything because he had extraordinary skills. The leader says what he did is impressive, so he asks him what weapon he uses, and he said all he used was his fists. Hearing this he says it's disgraceful to lose to a young martial artist who used his fists. The ant asks him what they can do about revenge. Hearing this, Ginger tells him that it was a fair duel so he cannot seek revenge since they are not thugs. Since this ant is blabbering too much, he says his master and him were friends and whatnot, but his turns Frankenstein in a second, scaring the hostess. Telling the crushed ant that who befriends a corpse, telling his servants to clean this place off. He moves the hostess, apologizing to her that he didn't see her at first, and since now the drinks smell awful they should go back. From what he has gathered, the Manhwa group has refused to pay taxes and even killed Ouyang Hu. One of his people tell him that it means that they don't even acknowledge the little deity sect. Another one of them asks him if they killed him. Ginger says they cannot go around killing people just like that since they are not gangsters. While discussing what they might do, the trio enters the room, with Jar Young praising Jin over and over again. As they continued their lame jokes, the Ginger passes by Gook saying his accomplices that he wants the money of Manhwa Merchant Group, and Gook overhears it. So he turns around to hear that the old man Lee Sungmin is a master negotiator and he is richer than what people realize. And all he can think is just how much Jin, the young master of the family, would be worth. The next moment we see Jin standing in front of his door since Gook rushed to him informing all this to him. Jin yawns saying that it is touching since he came back this late. He tells Jin to be serious since they might attack any moment. Gook wonder what can be done since the master is dead and his family has no guards currently. Jin recalls that the little deity sect were the ones that Insip informed him about, who planned to betray the sect. Jin asks Gook where they might be currently and he says that they must be at their base. Jin tells him to follow and then hands him an outfit. Gook asks where they are currently at, and Jin says that it is the guard squad's warehouse. Jin asks Gook that he must know where their base is, since they gotta come back before breakfast. Gook think they might just die with the two of them, and starts blabbering nonsense until Jin says it won't matter since they will be moving first. Jin throws the dagger towards Gook, telling him to lead the way. Looking at the sect, it is huge with beautiful trees and guards everywhere. Gook says it will be impossible and again starts blabbering nonsense, until Jin says that his job here is done. Gook asks him why did he bring him then, and Jin gives him a skeptical look. Gook says that the inside is fulfilled with guards and how they should infiltrate. But our Riz Lord breaks the door saying they should do it just like he did in his past life. Dan Wong was someone who enjoyed a good fight. Without hesitation, he walked forward and pointed toward a building, asking the guards where their sect leader was. One of them yelled back, calling him crazy for barging in and talking nonsense. But before the man could finish, Jin snapped his neck and told him not to make him repeat himself. He dropped the body on the ground. That was enough to provoke the others. All the guards rushed toward him with swords, shouting at him, asking if he even understood where he was and who he was messing with. Just then, a voice called out from an upper floor. A man holding a girl in his arms looked down and asked what all the noise was about. He spotted Jin and smiled, asking who he was. Jin replied calmly. He was an assassin. Then he asked if the man was the head of the lesser immortal sect. The man, amused, asked what if he was. In his head, he was trying to figure out who Jin was. He thought it was the first time he'd seen an assassin come in through the front door. Then he noticed Jin's hands and remembered what one of his men had reported earlier. The kid fought with his fists. He asked Jin if he was the heir of the Galaxy Merchant Guild. Jin replied, "And what if I am?" The sect leader stroked his beard and said he didn't expect someone so important to show up personally. Then his tone shifted. He said that in that case he wouldn't hold back. Suddenly a net dropped down above Jin, but he dodged it easily. The guards shouted to get him. Jin, now surrounded, thought to himself that it had been a long time since he fought a group like this. Maybe not since back then. He grabbed the net and swung it, using it as a weapon. As he took down enemies one by one, he thought to himself that even if his current body wasn't what it used to be, the thrill of battle remained. He tore through them easily, breaking weapons with no weapon of his own. Despite all that, he smiled to himself. This was actually starting to feel fun. The remaining guards hesitated. Some asked who he even was, shocked that he was fighting like that without a weapon. Just then, a sharp object flew past him and sliced his mask and cheek. Blood trickled down as he wiped his face. He looked in the direction of the projectile. Had come from and asked if someone was trying to show off their fancy gear. The leader answered with a smirk, saying he didn't usually like using expensive tools, but he'd make an exception for Jin. He raised a crossbow and aimed. Two guards grabbed Jin's legs from both sides. The sect leader told them to hold him down. One of the guards grabbing him thought to himself that he was definitely going to die today. The sect leader aimed and told Jin that even if he was good with fists, there was no way he could dodge this. More men appeared beside him, each holding crossbows. He gave the order to fire. Jin stood still as the arrows came flying toward him. In his mind, he noted that the sect leader clearly didn't care if his own men got hit. Even someone like Dark Blade would be speechless at this reckless tactic. Suddenly, Sama shouted from behind and threw a knife toward Jin, yelling for him to catch it. Jin caught the knife midair and deflected every incoming arrow. The sect leader watching in shock realized that Jin had blocked them all with just that one dagger. Jin turned to look at Sama. Sama looked confused, but then Jin gave him a thumbs up. Sama returned the gesture. Then Jin gripped the knife and threw it. It scratched the sect leader's throat before hitting the wall behind him. Jin told him calmly that he didn't usually use blades but made an exception for him. The sect leader, clutching the small wound on his neck, cursed under his breath and called Jin a psycho. He turned to his men and yelled at them for just standing there. He ordered them to kill Jin immediately. But before they could react, Jin dashed forward and closed the distance in an instant. The sect leader could barely process what was happening. Jin was already in front of him. Jin readied his fist and said that his real strength was in his fists. The sect leader quickly pulled the girl in front of him, trying to use her as a human shield. But Jin didn't stop. He used his lightning martial arts to strike with force. The explosion from the impact shook the room. As the dust cleared, Jin was holding the girl safely in his arms. He gently let her go and told her to stay back. The sect leader sat on the ground, shaking from fear. He looked up at Jin and wondered what kind of person he really was. If Jin was the heir to the Galaxy Merchant Guild, he should be a young man. But the way he fought felt like someone who had survived countless battles. Jin looked down at him coldly and asked what he was staring at. The leader tried to save himself. He laughed awkwardly and offered money. He said he had plenty stashed away and promised to reward Jin generously if he spared his life. But Jin stepped on him and told him to stop putting a price tag on people's lives. He pulled back his fist and said he didn't need any of it. The sect leader could keep his money. Then Jin drove his fist into the man's chest, piercing through his heart and killing him instantly. The room fell silent as everyone looked on in shock. He muttered one final word as he looked at the corpse: filthy. As morning arrived, the protagonist, his friend Simaguk, and the girl he had recently saved were walking together. Sama turned to Jin and mentioned that he would be taking a different route. He offered to escort the girl instead. Jin agreed and entrusted her to his friend. Sama and the girl then walked away from Jin. After a short while, the girl looked at him and asked if he was young Master Siguk. He was surprised and asked how she knew. The girl chuckled softly and explained that she had seen him at Dan Hyang multiple times. She also added that since he was clearly close with Jin, it wasn't hard to figure out. Understanding her point, Samaguk nodded. The girl then gave a respectful bow and thanked him for what he had done that day. She promised that if he ever returned, she would serve him a bottle of top-grade rice wine as a token of gratitude. Sama waved her off casually, saying there was no need. He hadn't done anything noteworthy. He also mentioned that he didn't plan to visit the pleasure quarters anymore. The girl looked at him and commented that he had truly changed. He responded briefly, then glanced over toward Jean and added that he too had a change, especially since his friend had changed so much already. Meanwhile, Jean was walking toward his home, thinking to himself that it was time for breakfast. Sometime later, after finishing his bath, he stepped into a room where a table full of food awaited him. He invited the two bald men he had brought from the entertainment district to eat, encouraging them to be comfortable. The two men gratefully accepted and responded politely. Jean, in a gentle tone, he told them not to hold back and to eat freely whenever they were hungry. One of the men expressed amazement at the generosity of the trading company, while the other jokingly asked if eating 7 meals a day was acceptable. Jean calmly confirmed that it was. As they chatted, the two bald men noticed Jin's wound had already closed. They asked if he had been all right the previous night. Jean gave a vague response while holding his chopsticks, but in his mind, he reflected on the situation. He realized that the sudden incident had shaken his core, something that wouldn't have happened in his previous life. This made him recognize the need to grow stronger. He understood that if he truly intended to protect the merchant group and stand against magic users, ordinary training wouldn't be enough. He needed something beyond conventional methods. Just then, a voice from outside his door informed him that a delivery had arrived. Curious, Jean acknowledged it. A servant girl entered and placed a box on a table. As he opened it, he muttered that he hadn't been expecting anything. Inside was a letter from his friend, Guang. The letter explained that after they had parted ways, Guang had stopped by a tavern, had a single drink, and then left. He jokingly called it a sign of real progress. Jean smiled as he read it. The letter continued, revealing that Guang had also meant to deliver something on Jinyan's father's behalf the day before but had forgotten. Now he was sending it along. Jean paused at the mention of his father, feeling surprised. The letter concluded with Guang saying he would leave the item with Jean and asking him to help watch over their escort agency once he had become stronger. As Jean examined the contents of the first box, he immediately recognized what was inside. It was a piece of century root. Judging by its appearance and condition, it had likely been aged for 4 or even 5 centuries. He estimated that with a bit of luck, it could help him raise his white lightning stage art to the 5th level. Holding the root in his hand, he reflected on the moment with quiet appreciation. Realizing this was the kind of gesture that showed the true value of having a good friend, he then turned to the next box placed beside him. Inside was another letter. This one was addressed from the Teju Trading Company. The letter spoke of a long-standing trust and friendship with his father and a gift offered in honor of that bond. As Jean processed the message, he recognized the name of the firm. It was one of the wealthiest and most influential trading companies in the Central Plains. He realized his father must have reached out to them personally for assistance. The depth of that gesture and the effort behind it caught him off guard. He hadn't expected such care and foresight. Inside the box was a bottle, and as soon as he saw it, he was struck with surprise. It was pure void stone milk, a miraculous elixir that martial artists could only dream of acquiring. It belonged to the same legendary tier as the 1,000-year spirit fruit, moon elixir flower, and 10,000-year snow ginseng. All of them were incredibly rare and nearly impossible to obtain. Jean brought the bottle close and inhaled its scent. There was no doubt it was genuine. Even in his previous life, he had only managed to taste a few drops of it. He found it hard to believe that a merchant had managed to acquire something even top martial artists struggled to find. Turning to the two bald men seated nearby, he called out their names. Myangbo and Janibo, and handed each of them a portion of the medicine. One of them immediately prepared to begin circulating his qi, asking the other to guard the room and eat later. As he accepted the dose, he asked what it was. Jean simply told him it was good for the body and warned him not to lose it, emphasizing its rarity. Surprised by the comment, the man stood up and walked over to a nearby storage room. Opening the door, he gestured inside and revealed stacks of similar rare items, all prepared for Ganon. Seeing this, even Jean couldn't help but be taken aback. A smile formed on his face as he silently acknowledged the simple truth. Money really was a powerful thing. 2 hours later, Jean was seated cross-legged in his room, meditating. As he consumed the elixir, he noted its taste was bitter and without aroma. It reminded him of martial arts itself. Bitter in the beginning with no immediate reward. Training was painful, and often it felt like there was no progress at all. Soon his body began to react. A strong heat spread through his core. He recognized that in his past life his body would have already broken down under this intensity. Fortunately, he had taken the time to strengthen himself beforehand. A sharp pain surged through him, intense enough to force his eyes open. It felt as if his entire body was burning. The more he tried to suppress the pain, the more fiercely it fought back. Realizing resistance was futile, he changed his approach. He would push through it instead. With that decision, a wave of powerful energy burst out from his body. Sometime later, Jean exhaled deeply. As he examined his hand, he activated his energy with a focused gesture. Then clenching his fist, he confirmed to himself that he had reached the 5th stage. However, a sharp smell caught his attention. He looked at his clothing and realized that the toxins released from his body carried a strong stench of alcohol. He wondered just how much the previous owner of the body had drunk for the impurities to still be so strong. Jean looked down at himself and smiled softly. It felt like a farewell to the remnants of his old self, but his attention soon shifted to the glass bottle beside him. He picked it up, eyes narrowing in thought. What lay ahead wasn't going to be easy. Absorbing pure void stone milk at this stage was like trying to form a bowl out of wet sand and then tossing it into a blazing furnace. The fragile structure was almost guaranteed to crack under the pressure. Yet, if he could endure the process, the reward would be immense. He could feel the intense spiritual energy within the elixir. It was testing him. As the dense black aura began to swirl around him, a thought crossed his mind. Perhaps he had become too greedy. Still, he clenched his fist in determination. With a powerful leap, he took off, heading toward a secluded spot to begin the next stage of his transformation. If he could overcome this trial, he knew he would emerge stronger than ever before. 7 days passed. Outside Jin's room, his brother, Liwa Ian, stood with a troubled expression. It had been a week since Jin Aeon had started circulating his energy, and there had been no signs of movement or sound from within. Concerned, he reached for the door, but the 2 bald guards stationed outside immediately stepped in front of him, blocking the way they'd greeted him formally. Recognizing them, Liwa returned the greeting. He asked if there had been any updates. One of the men replied that there had been none, but Jin had left clear instructions not to let anyone near. Hearing this, Liwa let out a sigh, wiping sweat from his brow as confusion set in. He mumbled that even so, going this long without contact seemed concerning. Before he could finish his thought, a sudden explosion blasted through the door from within the room. The 2 guards quickly shielded Liwa Ian from the blast with their bodies. As the dust settled, Liwa Ian stared in shock at the sight in front of him. Emerging from the room was Jin, his eyes glowing with lightning, energy radiating violently from his body. The overwhelming stench coming from the room made Liwa Ian recoil and cover his nose. His thoughts raced. Was this the condition known as chi deviation, something he had only heard about in passing? Panicked, all 3 men rushed toward Jin. One of the guards called out urgently to him. 2 bodyguards then tackled Jin, trying to pin him down in hopes of stabilizing his energy. They pleaded with him to come back to his senses. Liwa Ian tried to speak, beginning to ask if his brother was all right, but his words stopped midway. As he got a good look at Jin's face, a chill ran through him. What he saw frightened him so much that he couldn't say another word. Liwa Ian quickly caught his brother in his arms, trying to steady him after the sudden outburst of energy. But Jin rose to his feet once more without saying a word and began walking away. One of the bodyguards called out behind him, asking if he was all right and where he was going. Jin, without turning around, simply responded that it was too hot and that he needed to cool off, insisting they not follow him. Without hesitation, Jin leapt onto the rooftop and dashed off into the distance. Liwa Ian stood frozen, watching his younger brother disappear. He had no words to respond. After a moment, he quietly questioned himself how anyone could be hot on such a perfectly clear day. Meanwhile, Jean kept running. His thoughts were in turmoil as intense heat surged through his body. He could feel every part of himself burning. His physique, still not fully attuned to the immense power he had taken in, was reacting violently. Clutching his throat, he tried to suppress the sensation, but the energy inside him continued to rage uncontrollably. He realized that if this went on, it wouldn't just be the Yinha merchant group at risk. He could endanger the entire street. He needed to put as much distance between himself and others as possible. Eventually, he stopped at a remote mountain peak. His body was covered in veins bulging under the pressure, with lightning surging all around him. The pain had reached its peak. He thought of the color blue, likely tied to his energy state, and acknowledged that he couldn't contain it any longer. Memories of his death in his past life flickered through his mind. He knew that if he couldn't embrace this energy, he would face the same fate once more. Raising his hand toward the sky, he made a decision. The power had to be released. In that moment, a bolt of lightning struck down from the sky, crashing directly into him with a thunderous impact. Some distance away, in a nearby village, two people noticed the phenomenon. One of them watched in awe as the scene unfolded, observing the lightning surge from the earth toward the heavens. It was a sight he had never witnessed before, a reverse strike that defied natural order. Sometime after the intense phenomenon had ended, Jean stood alone on the mountain. Rain poured down steadily around him as he remained silent, letting the moment settle. Clenching his fist, he counted under his breath 6. Then paused and corrected himself 7. A smile formed on his face. If he was able to release that much energy, it could only mean one thing. He glanced at his hand, activating his energy once more to confirm it. The answer was clear. He had reached the 8th phase. Later, Jean walked through the city streets, still partially undressed from the aftermath of his training. His presence turned heads immediately. Several passers-by, especially the young women, blushed as they watched him walk by. A few whispered in surprise, wondering who the half-naked man was. Taking notice, Jean quietly thought to himself that he should at least get some clothes. Sometime after, he was inside a clothing shop, now dressed in a sharp outfit that gave him the refined appearance of a nobleman. He looked in the mirror, then turned to the shop owner and said he'd take the outfit. He asked for the price. To his surprise, the shop owner responded with a gentle laugh and insisted there was no need to pay. Jean, confused by the generosity, he hesitated. He didn't feel right about taking it for free. But the shop owner explained with a warm smile that ever since Jean had beaten up the troublemaker from the Ouyang clan and the Little Deity sect, the streets had become noticeably safer, fewer thugs caused problems now, and that peace had made it easier for him to bring his children to the shop. He pointed to his child nearby and expressed gratitude, saying that the free clothes were his way of repaying Jeannie. As he noticed the rain still pouring outside, he offered an umbrella as well. The shop owner's child walked up, holding out the umbrella toward Jean. Seeing this small gesture, Jean smiled back and accepted it graciously. A short while later, he stood outside the shop in the rain, waving back at the shop owner and his children. As he continued down the street, Guillaume looked around and reflected on the changes. Things truly did feel more peaceful now. In the past, he never paid attention to what the streets looked like after a fight. But now, recalling the shop owner's words, he could feel the difference his actions had made. People were safer, families were more relaxed, and the atmosphere felt lighter. Looking ahead, he saw people laughing and enjoying themselves. For the first time, Jean found himself smiling at the sight. The feeling wasn't so bad. Suddenly, his attention snapped toward a commotion behind him. Someone was running through the street in a panic, shouting for others to move aside. The man shoved someone out of the way, tried to escape from a group that was chasing him. The people behind him yelled not to let the man get away. As Jean observed the scene, he immediately recognized the person on the run. It was Chiliango. His thoughts locked onto the name with surprise. The man who had been chased earlier suddenly appeared before the protagonist. With a casual smile, he greeted him, commenting on the heavy rain. The protagonist looked at him with visible disappointment, noting that he hadn't changed at all. As the man stood confidently in front of him, the protagonist remarked again on how he was always caught up in a busy life. Meanwhile, a large number of people from the Moyong clan had gathered at the emperor's assembly. Among them, a red-haired man confidently acknowledged the significance of all the clan patriarchs coming together after such a long time. He specifically praised Moyong Bin for his efforts. This red-haired man was Dako Mayong, the patriarch of the Dao clan. In response, a green-haired man humbly dismissed the praise, saying he had only arranged the meeting. This was Mong Bin, the patriarch of the Moyong clan. Then, turning to another figure, he brought up a recent issue, mentioning that he'd heard about a regrettable incident involving Ouyang Sang's clan. He stated that Ouyang, who had apparently challenged a member of a merchant group to a duel and died as a result, asked if it was true. Hearing this, Ouyang Sing, the patriarch of the Ouyang clan, looked visibly irritated and surprised. Another person in the room then questioned the situation further, pointing out that Ouyang was supposed to be one of the more skilled martial masters of the clan. Yet another added that Ouyang, who had caused trouble with a merchant group, made a scene and ended up being severely defeated. Just then, loud laughter erupted in the assembly hall. Everyone turned toward the source, which was none other than Nam Gongwu, the leader of the emperor's assembly and the patriarch of the Namong clan. Known as the world's strongest martial artist and often referred to as the Blade Emperor, Nam Gongwu was laughing heartily, mocking the situation. He found it ridiculous that someone from a merchant group had defeated a member of the Ouyang clan, calling it even funnier than a jester's performance. He asked if others agreed with him. One man in the assembly could be seen trembling with anger, though another quickly agreed with Nam Gongwu to avoid conflict. At that moment, Ouyang Sing, now visibly furious, exclaimed that Ouyang had already been expelled from their clan. With his frustration boiling over, he declared that it was time to remind the merchant group of the true power of the Ouyang clan. Back on the street, the protagonist stood with his friend. He looked worn out and clearly exhausted from everything that had just happened. Jean looked at his friend and remarked that he was always living a busy life. Before the conversation could continue, one of the gang members pointed a finger at Jean and ordered him to hand over his friend, warning him not to get involved in something that could get him hurt. Jin's tone turned cold as he asked his friend who these people were. Explained that they were members of the Crimson Reaper Alliance, the most notorious underworld gang at the moment. They had recently been trying to take over the downtown district. He went on to say that since he was involved in the auction business, he had discovered they had taken his ledgers when he went to organize the books, a theft he clearly resented. Jean then asked if Mongo's hands had healed. Nyo showed his hands and said they were still usable, even managing a laugh. Facing the gang, Jean stated calmly that they didn't seem to be from the area. He told them to come back when Mongo's hands had fully recovered but to leave for now. The gang members were irritated, thinking his words were nonsense and that he must have grown up sheltered. But despite their thoughts, they felt an inexplicable pressure from him. One hot-headed member ignored a companion's warning, stepped up to Jean, and arrogantly pointed a finger at him, demanding to know who he thought he was. Before he could finish, Jean flicked his forehead with a single finger, sending him flying several meters and knocking him out instantly. Jean then looked at the rest of the gang and told them he was hungry, and if they fought now, he might kill them all. He advised them to leave while he was still being nice and promised they would meet again either through or himself. The clearly intimidated gang bowed and quickly left. Now more relaxed, he turned to Jean and asked him to buy food, saying noodles would be fine. With a disappointed expression, he clarified that the last time he was on the verge of death wasn't because Jean had beaten him, but because he was starving. He even remarked that food had always been the most important thing in the Central Plains. Irritated, Jean told him he could have just asked without saying so much, calling him insane. Simply grinned and replied that it was surprising Jean was only realizing that now. He then excitedly suggested they go to Jinpang Noodles, claiming it had the best noodles. Later in the restaurant, Myango finished his bowl and leaned back with satisfaction, saying he finally felt alive. After finishing his meal, he looked at Jean with a serious expression, teasing that it seemed like a branch of the beggars' sect had taken up residence in his stomach. He pointed out how Jean used to eat very little, like a bird, but now had changed completely. Added that people shouldn't change so suddenly and should live according to the natural order. Turning toward the shop owner, he ordered 2 more bowls of noodles, then quickly changed it to 4. The owner agreed without hesitation. After a short pause, awkwardly asked about the twins. Lai Ian replied simply that they were doing well. When asked what they were doing, he answered flatly, training. Guessed they must have grown stronger and then asked for another bowl. Even though he already had one in his hands, he remarked that their food expenses must be huge, calling them gluttonous spirits. Lai Ian replied with a blank expression, "I'm rich," which slightly irritated him, who reminded him that he had also helped in the past. Shifting topics, he asked how one could learn proper martial arts. Lian Ian questioned the reason but avoided eye contact and explained that he was wondering if martial arts training would help him take on the Crimson Reaper, the leader of the gang they encountered earlier. He described the Crimson Reaper as someone with countless subordinates who attacked in overwhelming numbers and retreated quickly when needed. Jean asked if he wanted to be taught martial arts. He hesitated for a moment before saying he'd be grateful. Crossing his arms, Jean asked if he would follow his instructions exactly. To which he confidently replied that of course he would. After all, he was the poisonous fox. Cho Myongo. Jean then pointed at the ground and told him to bow. Rubbed his head in mild irritation, calling the request embarrassing, but eventually bowed without further complaint. Standing back up, he jokingly threatened that if Jean didn't teach him, he would make a scene in front of the Yunhua merchant group's gates. Instead of responding seriously, Jean swung the shop's borrowed umbrella and held it out, telling him to hold it like he did. Was stunned at the simplicity of the lesson and asked if that was really it. Jean simply asked what else he expected. Grew frustrated, complaining that he had even bowed and threatened again to cause trouble. Before he could finish, Jean struck him with the umbrella and told him to shut up, instructing him to take the umbrella with one hand. Held the umbrella and asked what to do next. Jean explained that it was a gift and couldn't be given away but could be borrowed. He instructed him to swing it exactly as demonstrated 100,000 times and then return it. He emphasized that if he didn't want to commit to this, he should give up on learning martial arts entirely. Shocked, I confirmed the number, clarifying that it wasn't 1,000 or 10,000, but a full 100,000 swings. Jean, unfazed, told him to stop talking so much and either get to work or leave. When questioned whether he was serious, Jean grabbed his collar and reminded him that learning a few basic moves wouldn't be enough to kill someone. He explained that with 100,000 repetitions, he could at least defeat half of those men they had faced earlier with just a wooden sword. Instead, he had run away like a frightened animal. Jean told him bluntly that if he was going to live such a pitiful life, he might as well die, prompting him to nervously say he didn't want to die. Releasing him, Jean told him to remember whether he was a rat or a poisonous fox and to stop making empty boasts. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Suddenly stood and asked to borrow the umbrella. Before he could leave, the shop owner approached Jean and asked him to pay for Mongo's food as well. After paying, Jean thought to himself that he would wait to see if he would take the training seriously. He then shifted his attention to the Crimson Reaper Alliance, recalling his promise to seek them out and deciding it must be kept. The scene then moved to the Crimson Reaper Alliance headquarters. Inside a dimly lit room, a man sat on a bed while two bloodied corpses lay on the floor. In front of him, the group from earlier knelt in submission. A red-haired man looked at them and asked why they had allowed Chuliango to escape. The red-haired man questioned his subordinates, repeating their claim. They had almost caught everyone, but one of the poisonous fox's friends had stopped them, and they were saying that a merchant group's son had stood against all of them. The subordinates, sweating and visibly shaken, swore it was true. They explained that the man was extremely skilled in martial arts, with rumors calling him the strongest in the Yanghua region. Before they could finish, the red-haired man's gaze sharpened, his red eyes silencing them. He then gave the order to have the men on standby find both of them and kill them. The scene shifted to Jean, who was hearing troubling news. One of the twins explained that the Crimson Reaper was infamous for his brutality, preferring to tear opponents apart with his bare hands. The leaders of multiple sects, the Jensen sect, the Nopio sect, the Horned Dragon sect, and the Hong Pavilion had all been killed by him. He had absorbed several factions in the Yukon region, forcing tribute money from every business, from escort agencies and merchant groups to inns and pleasure houses. Even Chumiango had been extorted. The twins added that just the day before the Crimson Reaper had taken over an entire auction house. Jean listened, toweling off sweat from training, and acknowledged that if the Crimson Reaper discovered his identity, the merchant group could become involved in unnecessary trouble. He decided he should confront the man first before that could happen. Night fell over the Yukon shopping district. At the Passion House, the building was busy with guests filling every floor. Two women conversed, one instructing the other to check if guests in a certain room had left. Suddenly, a scream rang out, and another woman was comforted by her colleagues. She had gone into the Crimson Reaper's room, and something had happened. Worse, another woman named Seoli was still inside. One of the women, Manhwa, was informed that a new guest had arrived downstairs. She instructed the others to take the shaken woman away, let her rest, and avoid disturbing the Crimson Reaper. Jean entered the establishment. Manhwa approached with a welcoming smile, introducing herself as the manager and beginning to explain the house. But Jean interrupted her with a direct question. Was the Crimson Reaper here? Manhwa froze, startled, and asked him to repeat himself. Jean repeated himself to Manhwa, saying he was looking for the Crimson Reaper. She became slightly flustered, her voice trembling as she asked if he meant the association leader and whether he had made an appointment. Jean answered simply no and told her to just confirm if the man was upstairs. Hesitating, Manhwa glanced at a Crimson subordinate nearby, debating whether to answer. Finally, she told him that the Crimson Reaper was indeed upstairs. Without waiting to hear more, Jean walked past her, calling her by name and instructing her to evacuate the others. Her mind flashed back to an earlier thought. Seoli was still inside that room. Nervously, she warned him that heading up would be difficult, as the association leader's temper was rough. Jean only smiled and said it was fine. As he approached the stairs, one of the Crimson subordinates stepped forward, blocking his path. The man demanded to know who he was, warning that this wasn't a place anyone could enter freely. Jean didn't respond, continuing up the stairs. The subordinate struck at him in anger, but Jean quickly caught the man's spear and threw him to the ground. The commotion drew the attention of the other Crimson men. They surrounded him, demanding if he even knew where he was. Jean looked at them with a sharp, threatening gaze and asked which floor the Crimson Reaper was on. His words only enraged them further. They attacked, shouting insults. Jean calmly replied that if necessary, he would find the Crimson Reaper. After killing all of them as one man swung at him with a sword, Jean seized the attacker's head, took the weapon, and used it to defeat them one by one. He fought using only the weapons he took from his opponents, systematically knocking each one down until the floor was clear. Finally, he stopped and looked at a nearby door. With certainty, he remarked that it wasn't the right room. Lying, Ian prepared to attack again, asking aloud if he needed to smash every room. He began breaking into each one, sending the occupants fleeing in panic. After clearing several, he paused in front of another door, shouting in frustration that the Crimson Reaper wasn't there, and concluded he must be on the next floor. Meanwhile, in his private room, the Crimson Reaper sat calmly on his bed. Suddenly, two men were thrown inside, sent flying by Jin's assault. One of them, trembling on the floor, reached toward the leader and tried to speak. Stammering, he identified Jin as the merchant group's son. Before the man could finish, Jin stepped on him, slamming him back to the ground. Confidently approaching, Jin told the Crimson Reaper he had found him. The leader looked him over, speaking with casual arrogance. He guessed that Jin had come to pay Chomiango's debt in his stead. Jin ignored the remark, noting to himself that the leader's room was on the 5th floor and that it was unnecessarily high. The Crimson Reaper stood and walked toward him, asking if the welcome party wasn't to his liking, and if the climb had been difficult. Jin, now surrounded by many Crimson subordinates, stated that it hadn't been a problem, as stomping on his way up was his speciality. The two men now stood face to face. The Crimson Reaper smirked, saying his own speciality was looking down from above. Jin, rather than being intimidated, thought to himself that this was why he liked dealing with underworld types. Beating them was always satisfying. He then noticed something on the bed. The Crimson Reaper brushed it off, saying he had simply lost control of his strength and ordered his men to remove the person from the room. Jin's expression darkened. Calling a man beyond rehabilitation, he asked in a low, dangerous voice how he should kill him. The Crimson Reaper said he liked those eyes, explaining that people who try to kill him always look that way and that he had ripped all of them apart with his bare hands. Outside, civilians were fleeing the building, screaming. Someone asked what was happening, and a Crimson subordinate answered that some lunatic was tearing the entire pleasure house apart, urging the man to escape as well. Instead, the man raised an umbrella like a weapon and muttered the number 2874 before striking the subordinate. Removing his hood, he revealed himself as Shulio. He made a universal gesture toward the Crimson Man, declaring he was there to crush them one by one. Practicing his swings with the umbrella, he continued counting 2875, 2876, and 2877 when suddenly a loud explosion came from the building where Jean was. The turd crashes to the ground as our Chad falls down gracefully. The trash finds it amazing and tells his subordinate to hand him his weapon. Swinging it recklessly, he attacks our Chad, yet he manages to block it entirely. He cannot believe that a mere merchant's son has strength equal to him. He thinks of crushing Jean with rebound force, but as he closes the gap, our Chad thinks he trained in meteor and fist techniques. It seems he has learned from a true orthodox martial artist, but with a single movement of his fist he punches his gut, getting injured, so he exudes red aura going crazy. But his power-ups are futile as Jean easily tosses him up. He cannot believe that even after giving his all he is getting overwhelmed. Jean starts torturing him and he says that if he should have given him a taste of the dead woman as well. As he starts releasing thunder energy, increasing the stages gradually, but all the members can do it. See. As he goes to the 10th stage, the entire arena turns blue as huge waves of thunder energy shocks. They name this the Purge of the Dark Path, but Jean says they are one to talk when they are squeezing the lifeblood out of the powerless. They tell him to come at him if they want to end up just like this turd. And these guys do have guts as they charge at him. The bystander says that since the Red Reaper going to get wiped out, they won't need to pay tribute anymore, but if they have to pay tribute to Jean instead. Our masked Chad says that he is not that kind of person, since he has got money overflowing, so there is no need to worry about it. Then he continues to swing his sword, making them think he is insane. But he knows for a fact our Chad fights well. But thinking about this, he owns responsibility, so he has to get stronger. As he swings the umbrella, he calls himself the Venom Fox. This concludes this part. Comment Aura Farmer for faster updates.